Did you know that a simple devotion can completely transform your life? Saint Margaret Mary Alacoque, a humble French nun from the 17th century, received a mission that would change the faith of millions of people to this day, to reveal to the world the promises of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. It's something so powerful that, if you understand and practice it, you can find peace in your family, consolation in afflictions, and even the certainty of salvation. Now stop and think. Why do so many people still not know these promises? Could it be that the answer to your problems has been available for over 300 years and you didn't know it? In this video, I will guide you step by step through the 12 promises of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, revealing how to apply them in your life and the transformative impact they can have. If you are seeking answers amidst chaos, a refuge in difficulties, or simply a true closeness with Christ, you are about to discover something extraordinary. So, come with me to understand the devotion that changed the world and can change your life today. Childhood and vocational calling. Saint Margaret Mary Alacoque, who would later become one of the greatest messengers of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, was born on July 22, 1647, in the small village of Verosvres, France. Her childhood was marked by a simple and devout environment, but also by considerable challenges. From a very young age, Margaret demonstrated a singular devotion to Jesus, spending hours in prayer and cultivating a deep love for the Eucharist. While other children her age entertained themselves with games, Margaret preferred solitude to meditate and pray, a sign of her early vocation. Her childhood, however, was not without suffering. At the age of 8, she lost her father, an event that brought great financial difficulties to the family. Soon after, she faced a prolonged and painful illness that left her bedridden for about 4 years. During this period of trial, Margaret made a secret vow to the Virgin Mary. If she were healed, she would dedicate her life to God. Miraculously recovered, she remained faithful to this promise, despite the resistance she faced later on. The call to religious life became even clearer as she grew. Her family, however, had other plans. They wanted Margaret to follow the path of marriage, something common for young women of the time. Nevertheless, around the age of 23, she could no longer resist the impulse of her heart. With firm and courageous determination, Margaret chose to follow her vocation and dedicate herself completely to Christ, sowing the seeds of what would become one of the greatest devotional movements in the Catholic Church. Entering the convent. At the age of 24, Margaret Mary Alacoque made a decision that would forever change the course of her life. She joined the Order of the Visitation of Holy Mary in Paray-le-Monial in 1671. This order had been founded by Saint Francis de Sales and Saint Jane Francis de Chantal, with the aim of welcoming women who wished to live a life of contemplation and service to others. The order was known for its serene spirituality, dedicated to simplicity, humility, and charity, values that resonated deeply in Margaret's heart. In the convent, Margaret began to stand out for her extraordinary virtues. Her humility was so genuine that even in the face of difficult tasks or those despised by the other sisters, she performed them with unshakable peace. Her obedience also became exemplary. No matter how demanding the orders from her superiors were, Margaret accepted them with a spirit of resignation and faith. Moreover, her charity was so warm that she became a refugee for all the sisters, showing them love and compassion. However, Margaret also adopted an intense practice of mortification and penance, seeking to unite more deeply with the sufferings of Christ. For example, she often slept on the cold floor or wore tight ropes under her clothes to remind herself of Jesus' sacrifices. These practices, although misunderstood by some of her sisters, did not stem from a desire for self-punishment, but from a deep identification with Christ's sacrificial love. Margaret understood that suffering offered with love could be transformative, both for her and for the world around her. Life in the convent, with its prayers, penances, and contemplative silence, was preparing Margaret Mary for something extraordinary that was about to happen. It was as if each task, each moment of humility, and each sacrifice were a prelude to a greater calling that heaven itself would entrust to her. The visions of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. It was in the silence of the convent in Paray-le-Monial between 1673 and 1675 that Saint Margaret Mary Alacoque began to have mystical experiences that would mark the history of the Catholic Church. At the age of 26, while praying in adoration before the Blessed Sacrament, Jesus Christ appeared to her for the first time, revealing his Sacred Heart as a profound symbol of love and mercy for all humanity. In one of these visions, he showed a heart inflamed with love, surrounded by a crown of thorns, and with a burning flame rising to the heavens. A depiction that reflected God's infinite desire to love and be loved in return. Jesus entrusted Margaret with a central message. The world needed to make reparation for the sins committed against his love. He requested a special devotion to the Sacred Heart, including practices such as the Holy Hour and the First Friday's Communion, to unite the faithful to his wounded heart. These practices aim to remind people that even amid sin and indifference, Christ's love remained constant and welcoming. A clear example of this reparation would be dedicating a Thursday night to pray and meditate on Jesus' agony in the Garden of Gethsemane, showing solidarity with the suffering he endured for our sins. Each vision carried profound symbolic elements. The crown of thorns around the heart represented the offenses and ingratitudes suffered by Christ. The burning flame, on the other hand, symbolized the intensity of his love, which does not extinguish even in the face of human rejections. And finally, the open wound in the heart from which blood flowed was a sign of the redemptive sacrifice of the cross, a love that gave itself completely to save humanity. These revelations, though sublime, were not easy for Margaret Mary to share with her sisters and confessors. Many people did not believe in her visions and treated them with skepticism, causing her to suffer accusations of hysteria and delusion. However, Margaret persevered, sustained by the certainty that the message Jesus had entrusted to her was urgent and transformative. Little did she know that through her fidelity, the Sacred Heart of Jesus would become one of the most powerful and universal devotions of the Church. The 12 Promises of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. During the revelations to St. Margaret Mary Alacoque between 1673 and 1675, Jesus Christ presented 12 extraordinary promises for those who would venerate his Sacred Heart with sincere devotion. These promises are the response of Christ's infinite love to the world, offering peace, consolation, and salvation to those who open their hearts to him. Let's explore these promises one by one and understand why they continue to be so significant to this day. Promise 1. I will give to the souls devoted to my heart all the graces necessary for their state of life. Jesus promised to pour out special graces on those who live in union with his Sacred Heart. This means that each person, whether married, single, religious, or lay, will find the strength and spiritual balance necessary to fulfill their mission in life. Promise 2. I will establish peace in their families. The promise of peace at home is one of the most moving. In times of conflict and division, Jesus assures that families who practice this devotion will find harmony and unity through his love. Many faithful report that daily prayer to the Sacred Heart has brought reconciliation and serenity to their homes. Promise 3. I will console them in all their afflictions. Who has not gone through suffering or moments of anguish? This promise assures the direct consolation of the heart of Jesus in the most difficult times, as a safe refuge where we find rest and hope. Promise 4. I will be their secure refuge during life, and above all, in death. Jesus offers a special promise, the certainty that his heart will be a safe haven for those who love him, especially at the most important moment, the hour of death. He will be present, bringing peace and serenity in the passage to eternity. Promise 5. I will bestow abundant blessings upon all their undertakings. Christ promises to pour blessings on those who trust in him in their daily activities, whether professional, academic, or familial. It is not just about success, but a greater purpose, guided by God's love. Promise 6. Sinners will find in my heart the source and infinite ocean of mercy. This promise is particularly touching. The Sacred Heart is an ocean of mercy where sinners can bathe, find forgiveness, and start anew. It is an open invitation for everyone, regardless of their failures, to draw near to the heart of Jesus. Promise 7. Lukewarm souls will become fervent. For those who feel their faith weakened or who live in spiritual indifference, Jesus promises to renew fervor and rekindle love for God. Many testify how the devotion brought new meaning to their lives. Promise 8. Fervent souls will quickly rise to great perfection. Those who already have an active and devout spiritual life will find a quicker path to Christian perfection by diving into the devotion to the Sacred Heart. Promise 9. I will bless the homes where an image of my Sacred Heart is exposed and honored. Jesus promises that homes where the image of his Sacred Heart is displayed and venerated will receive special blessings. Many families enthrone the image in a prominent place, accompanied by daily prayers. Promise 10. I will give priests the power to touch the most hardened hearts. This promise is directed especially to priests, ensuring that by spreading the devotion to the Sacred Heart, they will have the grace to touch hearts closed and distant from faith, bringing them back to God. Promise 11. Those who propagate this devotion will have their names written in my heart, never to be erased. Jesus offers an eternal reward. Those who spread the devotion to the Sacred Heart will have their names engraved in his own heart as a sign of his eternal love and fidelity. Promise 12. The Great Promise. To all those who receive communion on the first Friday of the month for 9 consecutive months, I will grant the grace of final perseverance and eternal salvation. This is the most well-known of the promises and is often called the Great Promise. Jesus guarantees eternal salvation for those who receive Holy Communion on the first 9 consecutive Fridays in honor of his heart. The 12 promises of the Sacred Heart are a true expression of Christ's infinite love for humanity. These promises are not just words from the past, but a living and current call for all of us. Those who practice devotion to the Sacred Heart gradually experience Christ's transforming love in their lives. And it's not difficult to start. Just make an act of consecration, pray the litany of the Sacred Heart, or participate in communion on the first Fridays. Small steps that bring great transformations. And over time, the Church embraced this devotion, spreading it throughout the world. As we will see next, the spread of the cult of the Sacred Heart transformed hearts and communities, becoming one of the most important pillars of Catholic spirituality. Institution of the devotion to the Sacred Heart. The devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus gained strength after the mystical visions of St. Margaret Mary Alacoque, but its spread did not happen overnight. During the late 17th and early 18th centuries, Jesus' revelations found fertile ground in the spirituality of the faithful, mainly due to the support of influential religious leaders. Among them, Saint Claude de la Colombière stands out, a confessor and close friend of Margaret, who firmly believed in her visions and helped spread the message of the Sacred Heart with zeal and fervor. Imagine the impact this spiritual union brought. A visionary saint and a faithful priest working together to spread a devotion that would transform millions of lives. In 1856, the devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus was officially recognized for the entire Church by Pope Pius IX. This decision was a historic milestone as it acknowledged the universal relevance of the message received by Saint Margaret. Following this official recognition, churches and shrines dedicated to the Sacred Heart began to be built around the world. One of the most well-known examples is the Basilica of the Sacred Heart in Montmartre, Paris, initiated in the late 19th century as a symbol of spiritual reparation. This spread of devotion also led to the creation of specific practices, such as the Holy Hour and the First Friday's Communion, which continue today as concrete ways to honor Christ's love. The practice of the Holy Hour, held on Thursday night, is a moment of deep prayer and adoration in memory of Jesus' suffering in the Garden of Gethsemane, where he asked the disciples to watch with him. The First Friday's Communion has become a special devotion. The faithful are invited to receive communion for 9 consecutive months, as requested by Jesus in his promises. These acts are not empty rituals, but living expressions of love and trust in the Sacred Heart. They offer devotees an opportunity to make reparation for the sins of the world and cultivate an intimate relationship with Christ. To this day, the Feast of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, celebrated on the Friday after the octave of Corpus Christi, is one of the most important moments in the Church's liturgical calendar. This celebration recalls Christ's infinite love for all humanity, inviting the faithful to trust in his heart and respond with equally profound love. It is a feast that not only looks to the past, but continues to illuminate the path of the faithful in the present. Recognition and legacy. The recognition of the life and work of Saint Margaret Mary Alacoque came with time, but her influence began to be felt from her first revelations. After her death on October 17, 1690, at the age of 43, many faithful who heard of her mystical experiences began to practice devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. However, it was only 230 years later, in 1920, that Pope Benedict XV officially canonized her, recognizing her as a saint of the Catholic Church. This event marked the pinnacle of earthly recognition of her spiritual mission, validating the messages she had received as authentic and directly inspired by Christ. The impact of devotion to the Sacred Heart is notable to this day. Since the 18th century, this devotion has spread rapidly, becoming one of the most popular spiritual practices among Catholics. The 12 promises of the Sacred Heart revealed to Saint Margaret have become a refuge for millions of people who have found peace, consolation, and salvation through trust in divine love. Additionally, places like the sanctuary of Paray-le-Monial, where Saint Margaret lived and had her visions, have become international pilgrimage centers, receiving visitors from around the world who seek to strengthen their faith and experience the spirituality of the Sacred Heart. Throughout history, devotion to the Sacred Heart has influenced the construction of various churches and emblematic monuments. Besides the Basilica of Montmartre, another significant example is the sanctuary of Paray-le-Monial, which remains to this day a sacred place of prayer and reflection. There, the faithful not only learn more about the life of Saint Margaret, but also experience the meaning of the promises she brought to the world. This spiritual legacy was not confined to a time or place. It spread across generations, crossed continents, and continues to inspire the faithful to seek holiness through a deep relationship with the loving heart of Christ. Current relevance of the devotion. The message of the Sacred Heart of Jesus is as relevant today as it was in the 17th century when Saint Margaret Mary Alacoque received her visions. We live in a world marked by chaos, suffering, and a constant search for meaning. Devotion to the Sacred Heart emerges as a powerful response to this scenario, offering a path of hope and reconnection with Christ's unconditional love. It is a universal message that transcends time, culture, and age. In difficult times, who wouldn't want to find solace in a heart that burns with love for each of us? This devotion invites people to repair their relationship with God, opening space for inner peace and trust in divine mercy. The devotional practices introduced by Saint Margaret Mary remain accessible and transformative. The Holy Hour, for example, practiced on Thursday nights, is an opportunity for the faithful to spend time in intimate prayer and reparation, uniting with Christ's agony in the Garden of Gethsemane. The first Fridays of the month, another encouraged devotion, invite the faithful to receive Holy Communion as a sign of love and fidelity to the Sacred Heart. These simple practices can be applied by anyone, anywhere. One can dedicate an hour at home or in church to pray in silence, meditate on the gospel, and offer small acts of love and sacrifice. Moreover, devotion to the Sacred Heart resonates with other contemporary practices of the Catholic Church, such as the devotion to Divine Mercy, promoted by St. Faustina Kowalska. Both emphasize Jesus' infinite love and the need for trust and repentance. The combination of these devotions creates a solid foundation for facing modern challenges, offering the faithful a new perspective on life, centered on faith, forgiveness, and spiritual transformation. After all, if so many saints and spiritual leaders found meaning in this path, why not seek the same connection today? This teaching leads us to reflect on how we can transform small daily practices into gestures of deep love, like that which comes from the heart of Christ. And who knows, these practices might become the turning point that was missing in your life. Conclusion. As we delve into the life and legacy of Saint Margaret Mary Alacoque, we are invited to reflect on how we can apply this transformative devotion in our daily lives. How can you integrate the promises of the Sacred Heart of Jesus into your daily life? Could small acts of faith and devotion be the key to finding peace and purpose amidst chaos? Think about how the practice of the Holy Hour or the First Fridays can bring a new dimension of spirituality and connection with the divine. And what if you could experience Christ's unconditional love in a way that transforms your life forever? Now, it's time to act. How about starting today to explore these practices and see the impact they can have on your life? If this journey inspired you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. May we, like Saint Margaret Mary Alacoque, offer our hearts to the Sacred Heart of Jesus, trusting that He will guide us, sustain us, and welcome us now and forever. Before we finish, I want you to repeat with me and write in the comments the following phrase: Heart of Jesus, I trust in you.